Um, yeah. And right now I'm feeling really, really grateful for my community and having people just rally around some issues that are happening here. So yeah, do you want me to pass it to someone or yeah, okay. I will pass it on to Amanda then, if that's okay.
Thanks, Iris. My name is Amanda Carlson, and I'm staff of the subcommittee from Capstone Community Action, and feeling grateful for all the fruit trees, which are just busting this year. And I have like a bunch of fruit flies in my kitchen and lots of awesome fruit. I'll pass it over to Kashka.
Thanks, Amanda. And thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn off my camera because my connection isn't great. So my name is Kashka Orlo. I use the pronouns she and her. I am here representing the low and moderate income communities. And I'm really thrilled to be a part of the committee. I'm always grateful for every little thing, but currently I'm very grateful to be able to keep my windows open and have the breeze coming in and sleeping at night like a baby in these cool nights, except for last night. Thank you so much. I will pass it along to David.
David Plummer, and I'm helping to facilitate work with the Climate Council and whenever needed to this subcommittee. And I am grateful that this subcommittee has such fabulous people on it that have done so much amazing work over these months. It looks like my internet's unstable, but I'm grateful for that because it has set up the Climate Council to be very thoughtful on the issues. So I'm really grateful for all of you. And I'll pass it, sorry. I'll pass it over to Sue.
Hi, everybody. I am Sue Minter. I use the she, her pronouns, and I'm the director at Capstone Community Action. And my gratitude is actually that I am joining you from Cape Cod, where I've been able to come because of a wonderful friend who's invited me and a couple other friends on a book group. So I will pass it to Beverly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beverly Little Thunder, and I'm on the Commission for Native American Affairs here in Vermont. And I am grateful for the privilege and honor of being able to live here in Huntington. I'm looking out my window and it is gorgeous out. And I've been outside most of the day, and I'm really, really grateful for that privilege and honor of being able to go out and work with all the bugs and plants and trees and see the fat, juicy worms in my garden. So I'm really excited and grateful for that in ways that words don't describe. So I will pass it over to Claire.
Sorry, slow with the unmute today. I'm Claire McElveny. I am staff support from the Public Service Department for the subcommittee, and I'm similar to Iris. I'm very grateful for my husband, who has been picking up a lot of slack in terms of like household chores recently, well, for a long time, while I have other crazy things going on with work and other things. So I'm very grateful to have a partner in those endeavors. Let the public record show. And I will pass it to Abby.
Thanks, Claire. I'm Abby Willard. I am staff support to the subcommittee from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Nice question, Sarah, because I'm not feeling very grateful today. I'm exhausted and tired, and it's a tough time of year with all that's happening in the state government. So I am grateful for a dog that needs to go outside. So no matter what happens in the next hour, I have to go out because she needs to go. So I'll pass it to you, Sarah, as well.
Great. And so I think, Carrie, you're also considered staff support now, so I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Carrie Hengstenberg. I'm with the Department of Environmental Conservation. I am the planning manager, so I wear a lot of different hats, but one of them is I'm the Department Environmental Justice Coordinator. I'm also the program director for our Eco AmeriCorps program and do lots of other things too. And before I say what I'm grateful for, one thing I'm grateful for is Corey Rockefeller, who has just joined us as an Eco AmeriCorps member, serving with the DEC and assisting us, well, not assisting us, hopefully leading us in some environmental justice initiatives over the next 11 months. You all might remember Liz Shields, who was serving as staff on the committee, and she is off in graduate school. And this is actually Corey's first week.
Hello, everyone.
So just getting up to speed. I guess something I'm grateful for is similar to Beverly. Today, I'm really grateful for the little things. I was walking my dog last night, and you know how like the evenings have been so beautiful the last couple nights. And then I was on Stowe Street in Waterbury, and I walked past somebody's little garden, and they had an embroidered sign in the garden. So I stopped to read it, and it said something along the lines of like, enjoy this rose today, or enjoy these flowers today, because the next time you come see it, it will already be dying. And I thought like, wow, like that's like kind of morbid for my walk. But then I don't know, all day I've just been thinking about it and like seeing little things like the flowers, or like you know, Abby saying walking her dog, like just admiring that just pure joy in my dog and those kinds of things today. And Corey, I'm grateful for Corey.
I'm grateful for it. Probably along the lines of what everybody else has been saying, just this beautiful weather and being able to be outside and enjoy it has been really wonderful and refreshing.
Very welcome. And Kelly, I see that you've joined us. So just in time, we just took a moment to do introductions because there's new folks in the room. So if you want to introduce yourself, and if you're so moved to share gratitude.
Yes, I apologize. I have a baby here who's making some noise, and I'm sorry for joining a little late. I had another meeting that ran long. Yes. Anyway, I'll be quick. I'm Kelly Klein. I have a small child here who's being a little loud. His name is Eric. I am the small business representative on the Climate Council. And I'm very grateful for my small child, even if he's making a lot of noise. I'm gonna mute now.
Kelly. And Danielle, you're last, I think.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Danielle Bombardier. I'm a union electrician. I'm currently working as a teacher full-time, teaching building trades now. And I'm here as a labor representative. I'm on the executive council for the Vermont AFL-CIO, which is the state labor federation. So happy to be here. And I am grateful for the learning environment I have here at the tech center, because with COVID and everything else in school, it's been crazy. It's been a crazy transition, but staff has been super supportive, and it's been a really great experience so far. Thanks.
And I guess I should say last but not least would be Jane, if you want to introduce yourself, Jane.
Evening, everyone. Jane Lazorchek. I work in service to the Climate Council as the director of the Global Warming Solutions Act in the Agency of Natural Resources. I'm grateful because I'm 5 minutes late because I haven't seen my kids for the last 3 nights. So when I picked them up from school at 2:30, we went for a walk in the woods. So thank you for bearing with me, but I'm back now and feel a little reconnected. So thanks.
Oh yeah, and I'm just looking across my screen, and Ross, I didn't mean to skip you. I keep saying the last person, but I think Ross, you are the last person, so go for it.
Sure, and good evening, everybody. Ross McDonald, I'm one of staff members. I'm the public transit program manager. And like Abby, it's been a rough week, federal fiscal year closing, bunch of activities going. And I'm very thankful for all the folks I've been working with, whether it's my own staff, people in other agencies. It's just great to be in Vermont with so many people going to work on, everything together the way that we do. So that's definitely resonating with me today. Thank you.
Great. And I would invite anyone who's a member of the public, if you want to use the chat box to introduce yourself, that's always great. So we'll go ahead and dive in. We're a little behind, but again, we have a pretty short agenda today. So the first thing is to approve the agenda and the minutes from August 26th. Are there any questions or comments on any of those?
Hoping we can add a discussion on somewhere in the agenda about the Just Transitions moment.
About that Just Transitions, what? Sorry, I missed that.
The Just Transitions moment at the beginning of the next Climate Council meeting.
Okay, yes, thank you. Just Transitions moment at the start of the next Climate Council meeting. Yes, and I think we will, let's add that to the other business section if that makes sense. I see we have a representative from 350 Vermont here as well. So, else for the agenda or the minutes? Okay, then with that, I will consider them both approved by consensus, and we were going to leave time at the beginning of the meeting for public comment, so I'll pause now and offer if any member of the public has a comment to offer. Now would be a great time.
I don't know whether it makes sense or not for me to say anything at this point, Iris, given that the Just Transition moment was what we were going to talk about.
Oh, well, we could do that now. That would be fine.
Do we do that?
And then, yeah, and then
and you actually may want me to get off this call so you can talk about it without me. So it might be good. It might be good for me to just share what I'm thinking. So thank you for allowing me to speak right now and for all the work you're doing. It's really amazing. So 350 Vermont has been working on, our job is to engage, as many Vermonters as possible in the democratic process to make sure that elected officials and state representatives are reflecting the interests of the public and the people on this issue on climate. And so we want to be centering just transition, thinking about the fact that we're not just lowering carbon emissions, but how we do that is really critical, and who benefits and who loses. And so you all have been incredibly focused on that. We have developed a set of asks that we believe we think are important to see in the climate action plan that would help toward this just transition. We've also held 6 community conversations to hear from people about what they think priorities should be. And we engaged 188 people in the last 2 weeks. And we have collected over 1,300 postcards, people signing on to these asks. And as you're entering the last 2 months of the work before, or the council is, before that final, the draft plan is put together. And we were hoping to share to submit our postcards to the entire council with our asks, and to share, some of the highlights that we heard from the people that we've engaged to make sure that the interests of the people that we've engaged are centered in the process moving forward. We have, been a little disappointed that the public hasn't been engaged until now in the process. I think that it would have been great to start with that, to really hear what people need for this transition to work. And, my understanding and our understanding is that that the public engagement sessions are fabulous. And by the way, we're really encouraging everybody that we've engaged to attend those. So our sessions were not in place of, they were really to create space for people to have a chance to really think for themselves first and really talk about it amongst themselves so that they can come to your public engagement sessions and submit comments, rooted in sort of their lived experience. and not just be responding to the plan and sort of what's already been developed. So that's sort of the approach that we've used. And, we would like to respectfully submit what we have heard, because we don't feel like the voice of the people is as well represented in this process as it should be. I also want to acknowledge that, 350 Vermont's base is not representative at this point. One of the things that we have done is aligned closely with the Vermont Renews. We're part of the Vermont Renews Coalition and have really centered their priorities, the priorities of Vermont Renews in our asks. So yeah, that's basically what we're asking for, is 5 to 10 minutes at most to deliver our postcards on the 28th, and to share some of the highlights from the things we heard from the 188 people that participated in our sessions, to just add that to sort of what, the information that you all are moving forward as you develop this plan.
Great, and thank you for making that ask clear. And I think if I understand correctly, ask is, so the Climate Council, and not all of our subcommittee members might be familiar with this, but the Climate Council at the start of every meeting has made a point up till now to try to create space to have what's called a just transitions moment, which is meant to highlight issues around equity and justice in the climate transition, and has had different guests. I think that's, and maybe to help the group refocus, maybe Jane might say it differently, but that's, I think, what has been happening, to help the group sort of focus at the start of each meeting on those issues so that they aren't lost during the conversation of the Climate Council meeting. And so there have been different guest speakers and people coming to present. So Jane or David, maybe one of you can clarify, or maybe Iris, because we haven't necessarily, this subcommittee hasn't necessarily been part of identifying who's a part of those just transitions moments. And so just clarifying our role as a subcommittee in this conversation. Jane, go ahead.
Sure. I'm happy to defer if there's more clarity around the ask, or if Iris wants to speak first, but I could reflect on the process to date for those moments. So that started with a recognition that we went out, actually, before hiring Kaya, who's joining us today, we had looked more broadly at considering equity consultants to consider the organizational infrastructure sort of that has been built for the Climate Council, to think about how we can do better, like systematically within the Climate Council and the subcommittees for this first climate action plan, and in longevity to build equity into all components of the work. And so the three-pronged approach was intended to recognize the development of the climate action plan and the guiding principles, the way that we engage with the public in our attempt to co-create this plan, and recognize how much we'll have to do to further the work in the future with the public, and then recognizing totally bluntly the capacity that we had to take on a huge endeavor to rethink organizationally the Climate Council while building the first climate action plan. We also wanted to ensure that rather than having one training or ongoing trainings that would really require people to show up in a different way, that we would hold space at every Climate Council meeting to learn and grow and speak specifically to the work being done in Vermont and elsewhere that could inform our thinking around equity, justice, and inclusion. So to date, we've invited, I would sort of argue, in an attempt, non-advocates, non-partisan parties into the process that were speaking either on scientific research. Professor Panikar was our first one from UVM, who had worked with all of you on the EJ clinic that you offered. The same with the BLS professor, and then April Mendez. So we've had three. And yes, I think that there is room on the calendar next week to do this. And I think it was really thoughtful of Iris to recognize that we overlooked it on this coming council meeting. So I really appreciate that. I'd love to think broadly about Just Transition's role in helping us think through what those components look like going forward. I also caution a little, not that I don't think the message from 350 is totally appropriate, like seems great, seems in line with what we're doing. I will say that the council has been hesitant to date to invite in organizations that are viewed as advocate organizations, to the fault perhaps, but like it took us a while to even get Jared Duval supported to present on EAN's modeling to the council, because there was some feelings that EAN was an advocacy organization rather than a scientific based nonpartisan nonprofit. So I'm not sure how it would go over. More than happy to think about that with all of you if you wanted to push for that. I also know that 350 would be more than welcome and to provide those comments in the public comment period for the council. And I would just say that similarly to this kind of feedback, we're getting consolidated testimony and feedback on a regular basis now from organizations like the Vermont Forest Partnership, which is a consortium of a lot of organizations in Vermont, submitted significant comments on the actions for Ag and Eco, and have not had a space to share that public comment. And so I just worry a little bit about opening the door, because that's just one example of probably 10 that I could give on feedback, like the consolidated feedback that we're getting now on proposals and strategies.
And Sue, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask a question, I guess, because I think that 350 may not be the only organization that is having intentional additional outreach and engagement. For example, our Community Action Network is similarly doing events in different ways to reach the low-income community who may not have been able to engage in the process to date and needs a different kind of outreach. And I think that's part of what we in this committee are trying to do. So I really appreciate 350's efforts, especially with Renew, but I don't think you're the only organization working on bringing different voices and beliefs and requests and ideas to the table. So I wanted to find out whether you felt that there is not the opportunity within the process that exists now to offer your ask. And that might be more what I'm interested in, rather than trying to create space in a climate council, because once we did that for one organization, I would certainly want the same opportunity for the low income community, for example. So I guess I'm trying to understand where the process is falling short. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and I think there's a perception that that there isn't quite that the voices of the people who are not special interests on the council are not heard as much and not weighed as much as they should be. And so I would suggest that perhaps you could organize some councils where you invite all. So it shouldn't just be 350 Vermont, right? It should be hearing from all of the organizations that currently aren't represented, or they are represented, but they may not be heard as loudly as they should be, because of the power dynamics that exist, that are inherent in this kind of decision-making process.
I have a comment, please, because the two agencies that they are working with the disadvantaged people and the newcomer and the people that they don't speak the language are ALV and the refugee resettlement. And I don't see anybody mentioning this, reaching out to these two people, because they know everything about the people that you want to reach. So I think you should reach to these two organizations.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go Kashka and then Iris, and then we haven't built a lot of time for this topic on the agenda, but it's raising some important issues around other avenues for organizations to bring forward feedback. And so I really appreciate that piece is, I think, hopefully, Vanessa, you're hearing that and appreciating that and thinking about ways to do that in the future. But Kashka.
Hi, thank you. So I think that being part of Just Transitions and all of us and working so hard to come up with these guiding principles, and now having organizations come to the table, like an organization like 350 Vermont, who has done the work already to hear certain voices. For me, somebody who's representing the low and moderate income communities and those who have been marginalized in the past, I think it's very important as part of that document. These are supporting these are supporting facts, what these other organizations and whatever organizations they may be, not just 350, not just the VCAP VCAP agencies, the refugee resettlement, all those documents and all that information, I think, is an added bonus for us as Just Transitions, because that is essentially what we've been working on, is those guiding principles. And this is the factual information that's coming from the communities that we made this the guiding principles for. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yes, Kashka, thank you. Yeah, I think you put a point on, I think what a lot of us are feeling is that kind of feedback is really important. And I think we're trying to figure out where is our process falling down that it's not including that, or how could we create additional space for it. So I'm going to go to Iris on this, and then let's try to kind of wrap up this part of our conversation if we can. Iris.
Yeah, I think that those are really good points, and I'm hoping that we can sort of wrap them up and wrap them into something. I think it would be great if we could hold a short meeting for community organizations that have been doing outreach to their communities to meet with both Just Transitions Committee members, invite council members, and have the public engagement team there, because I think that would provide opportunity for all of that to get to all those people who need to hear it. So I don't know if that sounds good to people, but I think that all of these organizations should be coming to us with all the input that they've been gathering. And it doesn't make sense to bring one of them and elevate it higher than the others. So if we could set up a meeting to do that, I think that would be a really great way to create a process that's better.
That's a specific recommendation from Iris, and if folks on the subcommittee know how to use their little icons and want to do like a thumbs up or something, if you like that one, we can certainly push it forward to the steering committee, that we really would like to see something specific for community organizations that are doing this outreach work to have a direct conversation with public engagement. Kelly, you wanna weigh in on this one too?
Yeah, I know you want to wrap up. I just wanted to mention that in the cross-sector mitigation meeting last Thursday, we were talking about just transitions and equity considerations, and there was some frustration expressed that they're feeling like they're in a position where they have to come up with ideas and then try to make sure that they're fair and equitable. But it would be much better if we could hear what are people asking for, what are people's pain points, and then try to think of solutions that work for those rather than working backwards. So there's been a desire amongst that committee, at least, to have more like just straight up, how are we feeling? What do people need from some of our impacted communities, rather than having to try to tailor solutions to solve those, potential things that they want more information. So I think that would be a great idea if we had this conversation that you're talking about.
Okay, so we need to move on, actually, because we have only booked ourselves till 5. And while this is important other business, we have a takeaway that we would like to see something additional around this. I just want to recognize that there are real capacity issues of staff around the Climate Council right now who, like you just heard, Jane's been away from her family every night this week, going to really exciting, great public engagement events that our consultants are doing, I was at one last night. It was great. Vanessa, appreciate your point as well, and happy to have you follow up with Iris or myself with any additional considerations on what you think that would look like that could be good. So
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. In the spirit of moving us along, I did want to at least pause and say, is there any other public comment before we move on? Okay, great. And then I also realized I skipped announcements, and I did have an important announcement I was supposed to point out, which was Sue and I are still looking for a co-chair. We've said it before to our subcommittee members, but we just want to name it again, that we would love to see an additional co-chair because, and it's the perfect segue, our former co-chair, Kaya Morris, left us, but only to come back as the Climate Council's equity consultant. I'm so excited. So we wanted to kind of pivot. Hopefully, Kaya, you see the excitement of everyone on our subcommittee, too, to see you back. I want to pivot a little bit to have Kaya talk a little bit with our group around the work that she's going to be doing with the subcommittees and, you know, what that work looks like this fall. So, Kaya, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I think that we can, you know, I think even though we're running over on our agenda, I think we have at least, 15 minutes for this conversation.
Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. Good to see many of you again. Wonderful to come into community with some of you for the first time today. So thank you so much, Sarah. As I said, my name is Kaya Morris. Well, I actually didn't say it, but now I did, and it's on the record. I'm Kaya Morris, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm excited to be able to come to you through my private practice as an equity consultant. So being a part of this particular committee has been really important, I believe, in trying to help shape thinking about what these processes are going to be looking like. There's a few dynamics that I think are really going to be important that I'm going to be trying to hold space for while trying to help the groups move through thinking about what are going to be our strategies, pathways, and actions that we're going to put into the final plan, right? So part of the challenge is, number one, people have been at the gate. They've been waiting for that flag to go down so they can take off running with this work. So while this group has put together that body of work for the last few months, most groups have been hesitant, it's from what I'm learning, have been hesitant to really start to think about, well, so how would we use this? Hoping and waiting for this guidance to come through. So it's gonna be a little bit of an exam cram for some folks in the fact that we have the truncated timeline that we have, and that while I do want to be very clear that I don't want to be presumptive as well, that the actions and strategies and pathways that people have created are not already trying to hold equity in mind, there hasn't been a very high level analysis on many of the actions that have come forth yet. So if you all also remember of my work, much of my strategy is around trying to both hold that space, recognizing that there's some emotions, there's some fears, there are some anxieties, and also some hopes within this work that are all going to be coming into play within these deliberative dialogues. So I'm going to be trying to help support people as we're going through thinking, again, strategically. If we have 150 different actions coming out of one committee, the reality is that there is in no way physically possible that we're going to make it through 150 actions with our equity lens. But if we are to think about this, and that's going to be something folks are going to have to do anyway, whether this existed in life or not, is to think about, so if a particular set of strategies and actions are almost categorical, right? Maybe addressing food insecurity or food transportation issues, for example, we're going to categorize those together, and we're going to look at them in totality, and we're going to see what's rising, what are we missing, what are we not seeing here. My role, again, is going to be to try to hold that space, hold those emotions, and help us get through this in a way that doesn't have to be a zero sum, an either or. I'm trying to move us to a yes and. Okay? So, and in that process, there might be some pieces that either fall away, or there might be folks that are going to pick up that baton in a completely different venue than what we'll have within the action plan, but we can absolutely name them and recognize that we see them as important strategies that are pushing towards equity. Equity is in the front, But there are absolutely some structural components to how folks are going to need to make their way through these beautiful ideas into a cohesive plan that is understandable, that feels manageable, and that we can take and move forward with. Something external to this space that I think is important to name, and as I talk with the Climate Council and talk with the committees, I'm going to be giving these sorts of preambles. Also recognizing that our legislature is just as exhausted, maybe not as much so, but pretty much on trying to move this forward. So they need us to be clear as possible. Clear as possible. With this is what we need to do, go. These ideas need to be as understandable to your next door neighbor as they are to the person with multiple PhDs. And that is part of this process that we're going to have to really engage in. So I'll be working with the chairs of those committees and helping to think through what's that agenda going to look like for a meeting when I'm stepping into a space where people are like, let's go, let's start putting up sticky notes and like color code and spreadsheets and things like that. How we will really try to build in, create, and breathe through space to have these conversations. So it's not going to be something that's just placed on anyone. It's meant to be an iterative conversation. And I'm also trying to also make myself available as necessary for one-on-ones. Something that's also coming through with so much of this is that each committee is distinctly different. How they've chosen to go through their deliberative processes, the actual equity makeup of the committees themselves, everyone has a different sort of, their communities, so to speak. And so this isn't going to be a cookie cutter approach where I'm just going to have to like steamroll through and be like, y'all got to do this. There may be some groups that I'll need to do a little bit deeper work with than others. Some that I'll have to spend more time getting everybody really fluent in equity, like what that actually means, and others that will need more help in really looking at the work that they're trying to do and the actions as they relate to this work. So yeah, it's super easy. And we'll have the support. I do have an associate that will be working with this process to also help with administration, help with scheduling, because y'all know I'm a hot mess when it comes to my calendar and my emails, and making sure that if you all reach out to me or if there are others that have questions about this, that we will be able to make sure that those do not get dropped. In addition, this is an important point of celebration because as we were hearing even in the earlier conversations, there's still a lot of confusion about whether or not we are prioritizing equity. And while I will say that there is a very earnest heart within all of this, there's still inequities that we're dealing with. And I do need to name on the record that it's my understanding as well that no one has been paid from the public still yet. Still. So we need to fix that. we need to fix that. So yeah, I know it's wild, but that's what I'm hearing directly from members. So that's not something that I'm resolving, but it is something that I'm naming. And so, and I will name in such frank matters in this way as well, in trying to have us highlight what we need to within our conversations. So so this is it. This is y'all's like good work. And we are doing something groundbreaking here. And I'm very excited to be a part of this. So that is my high-level speech. We will have some really detailed pieces that I'll be working very closely with Jane on with regards to the timeline and what all this looks like. I am going to be participating in some of the community engagement events. I'll be at the one in Colchester this weekend, and then I'll be co-facilitating the BIPOC session as well. So as we're starting to hear from our public, we may raise some of those pieces and we may raise some of the questions. It may help to shape what is meant to be a dynamic conversation. I also will be tapping the shoulder of people like David and our folks from some of our other consultants as well, who have been working in more specificity with specific committees on specific goals, just to also get their perspectives and also to not just be like, oh, goodbye. So glad to see y'all. I'll take it from here. Because we know this is an all hands on deck effort. So I will, that's kind of that's my stump speech. And I'd love to take any questions if you have any, or anything that I can offer.
Thanks, Kaya. Yeah, so we just wanted to create space today for you all to hear from Kaya a little bit around what her role is going to be, is pretty high level, but we'll be, I think, having an opportunity to check back in with her as work progresses over the fall. And just, I don't know if folks have questions for Kaya or sort of additional thoughts around, you know, as she's doing that work with subcommittees, what that might look like. So some of you are on those subcommittees, so you might have some great thoughts about that as well. Before I go to Jane, anyone else? Okay, Jane, go ahead.
I was just going to share some logistical follow-up. And first off, I don't think anybody's more happy that Kaya's on board than me. It's really great to have Kaya's support. And I also feel like it's been really helpful for me to hear and talk about with Kaya as we unveil and roll out prioritization. That prioritization is a necessary next step to get us to the equity. Bye, bud. Have fun. For the equity screening, and having Kaya help us support what that'll look like, I think is really great. So I just wanted to let folks who are participating in other subcommittees know that next week, our hope is that on Monday, detailed guidance on prioritization goes out. And at that same time, we'll have substantive time at the subcommittees with cross-sector, ag and eco, and rural resilience and adaptation next week, with Marion and I being able to present on prioritization in support with Kaya, and Kaya talking about how the equity screening is going to work. So we're really excited that that'll happen next week. So. And I hate to hear that people aren't getting their per diems. I know only of one that fell through my own personal email cracks, but I don't know of many. And I hope I know people on this subcommittee who have submitted, I hope you've gotten paid.
Thanks, Jane, for recognizing that and taking that feedback, and I'm sure you'll have Marion follow up. But if other folks haven't been paid, you know, just please raising your hand and letting Marion or Jane know, I think is really, not right now, not literally raising your hand right now, but I mean, you can, but also you can just, follow up by email to let them know. And if you know how to connect with me and it's easy to send me an email, I'm happy to help make those connections as well. Anyone else with questions for Kaya? Comments? Okay.
You nailed it, Kaya. Nice one.
So great. I think so many of us were feeling some heaviness around, we've done this huge lift around these guiding principles and this equity assessment, and to know that it will be brought to life in the coming months feels really great. And I think our subcommittee wants to be here in support of your work as well. So let us know how we can do that. I'm going to pivot now to talk about the Climate Action Plan draft. There are a couple sections in the Climate Action Plan that our subcommittee is actually responsible for drafting. So part of our work this fall will be doing that, right? We'll be working on that. So the first piece is really sort of, I don't know if summary is the right word, but it's essentially like a short summary around like what are the guiding principles really about, and what is this just transitions piece is really about. So the second piece that we have to write is a little bit more substantial, and I think we'll be hopefully using some future subcommittee meetings here to like have maybe a group like we've done in the past, work on it, bring it back, have the subcommittee kind of think about it, digest it, and then, you know, we'll do that work this way. This first piece that's really a summary, Sue and I met, and we really think that what could likely be done is that we just pull some language from what we've already created, right? We have written as a subcommittee some really great stuff. And we don't need to write new stuff, that we can probably just pull from that and distill some things down into that summary section. And part of why I'm saying that is that the timeline for us to submit that initial section is coming up pretty fast. So our subcommittee isn't really slated to meet again before we'll need to provide that text to to the Climate Council. So if folks are in agreement, and I guess first I'd invite Jane or David if I've done sort of a nice summary on what exactly is being asked of us in this moment, if there's anything you want to add. Great. Okay. So I guess I would turn back to my subcommittee members and say, are you in agreement that if we need to provide like a paragraph or two summary, that maybe there could be some staff that might be willing, or other subcommittees who might be interested in just pulling some text out of our existing documents to help provide that summary? Is that a strategy that you all feel comfortable with, and we could just empower those folks to do that? Or I'll say it in this vein of consensus, is there anyone that would like to, that doesn't feel great about that, or would like to discuss that process a little bit more? Okay, hearing none. And I love when people, at least in Zoom, use the little thumbs up too. Thank you. I love that a lot, actually. So people
One word that I've heard used, silence, is consent.
I'm all over that. And you guys are actually I love the subcommittee. People are pretty great about speaking up. So I'm saying that we have consensus on that, which means you're essentially empowering Sue and I to sort of finalize and submit that. And so the next ask would be, are there a couple staff or subcommittee members? And really, this isn't like a full group, but like, is there anyone who wants to help take on this task and might be willing to support it? And, you know, and maybe staff want to follow up and think about it. I don't think it's a huge task. Right. Ross.
Hey, Sarah, can you tell me a little bit about the scope? Are we looking for the full overview with the ways that these would be policy options would be moving through the rubric? Would it just some hours and scope and scale would be helpful for me to kind of see if I can't plug in some admin time?
I don't have the exact text in front of me, but it's essentially, I think, providing a summary of like what was the Just Transitions Committee's work about, and like we created these guiding principles. I think essentially sort of like a summary kind of introductory piece. Jane or David, did you want to add anything to that? Jane's got the screen sharing. Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, so just so folks see, there's this beginning of the CAP, and there are these foundational components before we get into the bulk of the strategies and actions. And so there is a component of building equity into the CAP. I am happy with your review and input as always. This whole section 7 would be drafted at the same time and go to the council. There's a very detailed timeline that was provided to the council that shows when the components, who's drafting them, when they come to the council, where they'll be discussed in public meeting, when written comment is due, and when revisions are due. So yes, Sarah, this section 7 is due to the council on October 5th. I also recognize that if it feels impossible that I'm happy to discuss that with you all, but that I do think that your section is this guiding principles, and it is, intended to be 1 to 2 pages of a synopsis of the guiding principles and the scoring rubric, recognizing that later in the document, in the implementation component or framing the implementation, there'll be another component of just transition and equity consideration in implementation. And I just wanted to, why I had put my hand up originally was to highlight that Iris has stepped forward to serve on the cross-cutting ideas, counselors, CAP outline group that helps us carry these components of the CAP that don't have a neat home in the subcommittee, because we really are trying to keep CAP drafting with the technical expertise and in the subcommittees with staff supporting them. But the implementation section, as well as cross-cutting themes and ideas that elevate out of different subcommittees, need counselor ownership with staff and recognition of how we're going to formalize it in the CAP. And Iris is the representative and she's intended to represent just transitions. We have one counselor from every subcommittee. So we'll be thinking about that in future iterations. And I would hope that that is what Sarah was talking about, where we could really lean in and use the subcommittee at a future meeting to think about what that looks like. And likely I even put consultant, who is Kaya, because Kaya, I think, will be thinking a lot about what we do and don't do with the scoring rubric in the coming months and where we need to go with it and what further work we need to do past December 1st.
I want to make sure that I just flag for the public record, because I didn't at the last time that you mentioned that I didn't formally agree to that. And I am not sure that I have the capacity. Like I'm going to work to attend as many meetings of those as I can, but I cannot commit to being at those because of capacity. And I would really welcome if other counselors would be willing to help step up to that, because I cannot commit to fully making all those meetings because I have other commitments.
Yeah, now in following up on Iris's point, that's a shared burden amongst the counselors who stood up. And so the idea being that the initial meeting would be just a recognition of who can bring what capacity. And I know Iris, I've heard loud and clear that she's not wants to focus on the drafting and the writing, not the process behind the other components. So I think a further support from you would be great.
I'm sorry, we're going to get to time, and so I just want to pull us back to sort of the most essentials we need to figure out tonight. So so there's additional work and conversations around drafting on the plan, and we can follow up in an email with folks with this text, so you can think about staff if you have some capacity to bring to helping us with this task. I think the initial task is abbreviated, Sue.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that for what we wanted to make sure everyone was aware of is there's a very small specific piece that we need to sort of get your consent around, because you won't be able to see it before it's advanced by October 5th, but that we would be really taking the language from our guiding principles practically verbatim, and that we aren't straying from that, but we didn't want to do that without bringing that to your attention. So that's really the question of right now. And these other elements we have to get to soon. I don't know the timeline, but everything's happening quickly. So that, I think, Sarah, was all I wanted to reaffirm.
Thank you, that's right. And I think I heard, because I heard silence is consent. I don't actually like that a lot, but I heard that people were feeling good about that approach. And so maybe staff, you can reflect on if you could lend some capacity to that, or if anybody else wants to do that. Okay, so more to come on drafting of the plan. I'm going to keep us going. We're at time, but just a couple other really important things that we want to name. So we won't use a lot of time at this meeting then for reporting back from other subcommittees and climate councils. I sent out a reminder email with a link to the public engagement meetings, and just want to encourage people, if you want to go to one of those, that would be great. Sue and I have, in talking and thinking about the work ahead of us, including writing this section for the Climate Action Plan, have thought that we'll continue with the every other week meeting schedule, if that makes sense to folks. So I just want to check in with the subcommittee and see, does that sort of every other week meeting schedule still make sense for us? Thinking that part of our work will be this section of the climate plan, and then part of our work will actually be preparing for a legislative hearing, which is you'll be getting an invitation for, but has been scheduled for October 22nd. And it's a legislative hearing to talk about just transition specifically, so October 22nd. So our thought is that our next meeting, which would normally be in a couple weeks, would be a great time for us to check in on that and talk a little bit more about that legislative hearing. It was just released, I think, even today. So you will get like an invitation, I think, to participate. So with that being said, anyone want to weigh in on our meeting schedule? If you feel good about continuing with the every other week, maybe like the little thumbs up or a little like body language head nod, anything like that. that would mean our next meeting would be for
Sarah, we've lost your sound. Maybe go off and on mute again.
what? That's
There you are.
weird.
You're back.
Maybe I'm just actually pushing
You're back
a
now.
button. Maybe, okay. I was pausing just to make sure. It sounds like meeting October 7th sounds like a great idea, and we'll just continue with the every other week meetings. Sounds great. Okay, with that being said, we're sort of at time on our meeting, and so again, we just want to invite, I don't know if anyone on our subcommittee is feeling like are thinking they'd welcome the chance to join Sue and I as co-chairs. We would invite you to do that now, or you could follow up.
You can email us, and what it really is involving in terms of time is in the off weeks that we're not meeting as a subcommittee or a subcommittee, we are meeting as the co-chairs. And for the most part, that's the time commitment, and there are tasks. And Sarah carries many tasks, and we need her to be able to take on fewer tasks. So anyway, we would invite another third person to join us. Thank you.
Help us plan out our work as well. Plan out the work of this group. All right, so feel free to follow up with Sue or myself on that one. And I think then I hustled us through the end of our agenda. So before we sort of call it quits, just want to invite anyone who was thinking Iris, you maybe had something you wanted to add at the end of the meeting, or anyone else who had other business, please feel free to jump in now.
I think that it's probably something that we would want to discuss more in depth, so I can hold it till the next meeting. But I'm just thinking about, as we are bringing forward recommendations, if there are any strategies that Just Transitions would like to recommend, because I think that there are some that might fall more specifically into our purview than they do to others. So other subcommittees. I know that we are not a we are not a subcommittee that is intended to bring forth recommendations, but I think that passing some along might make sense. So maybe we can talk about putting that on the agenda for the next meeting.
That's great. And I would invite anyone else who has thoughts for agenda. Thank you for naming that. It's something we could definitely discuss as a subcommittee at our next meeting. Other agenda items? Legislative hearing. All right. Well, then we'll call it quits. Oh, wait, Sue, did you have
Well,
one more thing?
I want to say that we're going to regroup on the discussion that at the top of the meeting and come up with a plan of action to address the concerns that were raised.
Yes, yeah. Okay. Great, we'll call it quits. I guess we really always need more than an hour. I feel like I tried to squeeze it in. I want to go outside, soak in a little bit of that fall sun tonight, everyone. And thank you so much for making time. We'll see folks in a couple weeks.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.